especially Prakriti moves, and time also moves, Kala, and fruitive activity. The way that Baladev Vidyabhusan explains is, of these, 4 are eternal and 1 is temporary. And the one that's temporary is karma. But time is eternal, living entity is eternal, material nature is eternal, and Ishvara or God is eternal. But karma is not eternal. Now, time moves like anything. Time and the living entity move Prakriti, so Prakriti moved, but it's eternal. Whether it's manifest or unmanifest, material nature is eternal. Here's a very nice painting. I hope you can see it clearly. It's an artist's rendering of an important teaching in chapter 7 of Bhagavad Gita. It's illustrating the 8 elements that make up Prakriti. What are those 8? There's 5 gross. You ready? Earth, water, fire, air, ether. From more gross to more subtle. Earth, water, fire, air, and all around is ether, or sky. That's 5. And then there's 3 subtle energies made up of mind, intelligence, and our dear friend, false ego. Those are material energies. Bina prakriti ashtada, in Krishna's words. Bina means separated. Prakriti, material nature. Ashtada means 8. So those are the 8. And aside from the 8, the next verse, this is chapter 7, Krishna says there's another energy of mind. It's not Bina prakriti, it's para prakriti. It's transcendental. And that transcendental entity is the soul. So that soul is depicted in the painting. And adjacent to the soul, or within the heart of the soul, is the Supreme Soul, or Paramatma. Atma and Paramatma. Brahman and Parabrahman. So, why is this there? Because Bhagavad Gita is a treatise on self-realization, as we heard. So many people don't know who they are. They don't know who they are because they think of the self in terms of the body. Just the other night, when was it? Huh?
2 days back.
2 days back. There was a little boy that came with his mother, an hour and a half's drive. He was really enthusiastic. He wanted to hear. His lights were on. He was really bright. Kind of playful little boy, but still, he was bright. So I asked him, he was much, how old are you? What's your age? You're 12. He was 7. So think back when you're like 5 years earlier. And I asked him, are you good at school? He said, yeah. Very confident. Okay, so I'm going to do a quiz for you. Ready? Point to your foot, point it to his foot. Point to your arm, point it to his arm. Point to your head, point to your head. Point to your chest, point to your chest. Now point to you. He pointed to his chest. Meaning, no, the body is me. Then we went through it again. You say, my foot, my arm, my head, my chest. Where's the me? That's the covering, and then where's the I? He looked at his mother. Because largely in this world we're identifying with the covering rather than who we are. And those coverings, those are called upadis. Upadi means a covering, it's a designation. Just like you have a yellow sweatshirt on with the word Gap on the front, but you're not a yellow Gap. That's not who you are. You're the person within, but you're not, the body is also not who you are. You're not a 12-year-old student. You're something else, because 12-year-old student is going to change, and that's going to change, and that's going to change. The thing keeps changing. So what's the unchanging? What's the self within? It's the soul. And so Bhagavad Gita is helping us to understand that's who we are. So there's a fundamental teaching to understand who you are. And then comes practical activity. How do you live your life, back to the topic that I was asked to speak about, in practical ways so that who you are stays in the front of your consciousness all the time. Because it's one thing sitting here saying, okay, I'm spirit soul. That's another thing living your life that way. Right? So the teaching is the soul is both conscious and consciousness. I'm pointing this out because I heard Prabhupada say it so many times. I was puzzled by what he meant by it. But it's not so difficult. Here's an example of a lamp. Maybe something that somebody offered on Diwali. So there's a wick and in a little clay cup, probably some ghee or oil inside, and it's light. But it's not only light, but it's illuminating things in the room. So it's light and it's luminous. The Upanishads speak that like a lamp is luminous and it lights up pots and plates. Pots and plates don't flame, but they're illuminated by the light of a lamp. Similarly, consciousness is a symptom of the soul, and that consciousness expands from the soul. Just like I can see the wall on the other side of the room, and I can see a nice painting on the wall, and I can hear sounds. This consciousness is going out, but from the conscious self. And that's who we are, not the covering. This is another illustration. Along with the conscious self, there's the supreme self, or super soul, Atma and Paramatma, and both are within. Tomorrow at the Potomac Temple, I've been asked to speak something about Bhagavad Gita. I plan to emphasize this. From chapter 13 of Bhagavad Gita, I hope you're listening. There's chapter 13. It's a chapter on Sankhya. It's very practical. It's not just philosophy. It's philosophy, but it's practical philosophy. In that chapter, Arjuna is asking 6 questions. There's 3 sets of 2. 2 and 2 and 2. What is the field of activity and the knower of the field of activity, matter and spirit? What is knowledge and the object of knowledge? What is Prakriti and what is Purusha? Matter and spirit, matter and spirit, matter and spirit. 3 divisions of matter and spirit, making 6. So the difficulty of self-realization is we're identifying with matter, like the covering. Or here's an illustration I like. It's just, I'm a visual person. Here's an eggshell. And there's some light coming out of that eggshell. How is that light coming out of the eggshell? Well, there's something luminous inside. And only a little bit of light is coming out because most of it is contained in the eggshell. And self-realization means to let that light, the luminosity that's within the eggshell, escape and see the self as distinct from the covering. That's what self-realization is. It's a little bit more because there's 5 topics. We're just covering primarily right now 2, well 3. There's Ishvara, that's the Paramatma within. There's Prakriti, that's the covering. And there's the soul. Here's characteristics taught in Bhagavad Gita. The soul can be experienced or perceived by the presence of consciousness. There was another girl 2 evenings ago. How old do you say she was? She was 8. She wanted to know, how do you feel the soul? How do you feel the presence of the soul? That's a nice question to ask when you're 8. How old are you? Yeah, you're 8. Isn't that a nice question to ask? How do you feel the presence of the soul? Well, by consciousness. I'm responding to, I've asked a question, but I'm also giving the answer to the question. It's right here on the screen. The soul can be experienced or perceived by the presence of consciousness. What does that mean, anyways? So, when you're asleep, are you conscious? Well, you're dreaming, and you're probably feeling something. If, say, a mosquito bit you or something fell on your head, you definitely, your consciousness hasn't left. It's just operating differently. But when the soul leaves the body, consciousness leaves the body, because the soul and consciousness are the same. The conscious self is you, and you can experience yourself in terms of consciousness. It's a nice thing to think about, but then how to experience it? How you experience it is through yoga. Not just asanas, not just physical yoga, but connecting with the Supreme. The yoga process means connecting with the Supreme. Next point. Many spiritual traditions of the world accept consciousness as being a symptom of the soul. So this is at death, something changes. The elements are still there. All the chemicals are still there. The physical part is there, but there's a change. That means something non-physical. This is an important understanding. It's in several places in Bhagavad Gita, and it's in several places of any wisdom literature that's going to teach you who you are. Somehow Bhagavad Gita has endured for thousands of years as such an important wisdom literature. Even our language, just like this example, my foot, my hand, my leg, my head, there's my, like my shirt, but I'm not the shirt. My socks, but I'm not the socks. My eyeglasses, but I'm not the... A surgeon at the, what's the university in Atlanta? Emory University. A surgeon at Emory University Hospital was doing an open heart surgery on a patient, and all of a sudden, you see that machine next to them. It showed the surgeons that there was